Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Lau with Kenchan Crafts, and today I am going to just do a review of all my pens and inks from May 2023. I know this is a little overdue, a lot overdue, but I'll be doing this as well as my July and August currently inked review right after this, so I'll have those two videos out for you guys. The first pen from May and June was my Platinum Kanazawa Makie. Again, this is a modern Makie pen, and this pen writes with a lovely little bounce, and it's a very surprising bounce, and I love that about this pen. So it definitely helped make this pen feel more comfortable than it is, because it is a very thin pen. So the girth of this pen is probably like 7 or 8 millimeters, so it's a super thin pen. It is more of the size of a regular ballpoint pen than it is a fountain pen, and I only say that because I'm very used to the girthier fountain pens as I went deeper into the fountain pen world. So this is more of a pen that's not typical of current fountain pens these days. So the comfort of this one is definitely not as comfortable as I would hope it to be, because it's such a beautiful pen. I wish it was a little girthier, but also at the same time, like, it's beautiful in a slim model. It's really difficult balance, and that I have to just accept that it's a little bit less comfortable, but so beautiful, and I pick it up all the time to write. So an example of the journal entry for this, and I had this one inked up with Ferris Wheel Press Algonquin Maple. This red is a beautiful, gorgeous red. It doesn't dry down too dark, but it definitely is darker when dried. And when it's wet, it's a vibrant, bright red. And when it dries to this darker, shade of between maroon, black, and red. So all three of those mixed together, you would get this color. It's a lovely ink. It flowed out really well out of the pen, and the pen is just a great writer. So definitely love writing with this pen. So for the ink color and legibility, I will give this one a 9 for the color of the ink. So ink, flow, and then comfort. Right. For the flow of this pen, it was 10. There was no issues with it keeping up for me writing for a long time. You know how some inks, as you write, and then it just gets lighter and lighter and lighter. Those tend to be a dry ink pen combo, but this combo is definitely a 10. It was just lovely to write with. And the comfort of this pen, I'm going to give it a 7.5. It's not terrible, but it is very thin, and so when I'm writing with this pen, there's not a lot of grip girth in this grip section to hold it comfortably, but it isn't extremely uncomfortable. So I'll give it a 7.5. Okay. The next pen I had inked up at that time was my Leonardo Supernova Bohemian Twilight. I had this one inked up with Diamine Golden Honey, and I just thought this was such a lovely pairing. It was, this orange went lovely with the orange hues throughout the pen, right? So you can see my Supernova definitely has a lot of orange in it. So Golden Honey, it was such a beautiful ink. It was a much drier ink. I tested this in other pens, and it was it dragged along the paper. But coming out of my Leonardo Supernova, it was just gorgeous. There was not a lot of shading, even though Golden Honey is a really nice shading ink. All right, so here is some example of that lovely Diamond Golden Honey ink. It actually does shade. It shades very nicely, and you can't really see the shading here as much. And here's another little bit that I wrote, but I can definitely see the shading. There's darker parts and lighter parts. If you have a a more average flowing pen, this Diamond Golden Honey would be so beautiful, such a beautiful shader. Because it's a drier ink in a very wet pen, it came out on the average side, which is perfect. So in terms of the ink, it's a great shading ink, and it just looked lovely when I wrote with it. So I'm giving this ink a 9. And the flow, definitely a 10, because it was not a gusher and it wasn't dry. So this pen and ink worked really well together. And the comfort of this pen, I'm going to give it a 9.5. I love girthier pens, like they're very comfortable to write with. So, and the Supernova, this one has a softer drop down from the barrel to the grip. I think the Supernova from last year had a really sharp step down, but this one is a smoother step down, and so it wasn't uncomfortable as I am holding it, because my thumb does hold on to this very section here. So I feel like if I did have the primary manipulation from 2022, it would be very uncomfortable to write with, because this is how I hold my pens. If you hold your pen down here, it would be, it's pretty comfortable. The girth of this pen is lovely, and so it's definitely, I would give it 9.5. I would give it 10 if it wasn't on the heavier side of a pen. It is slightly heavier than most of the pens that I write with, but I do like the weight. The next pen is my Pineider Arco Desert Beetle, and I had it inked up with Wearing Ghoul's New Hope Crown. So it was this lovely gem. This one I also did finish as well. It wasn't dry, but it definitely didn't feel amazing coming out of this nib. Even though Pineider's quill nib is pretty wet, the ink is very dry. It felt dry coming out of this nib. It definitely shades a lot. So Wearing Ghoul's New Hope Crown is a dry ink. Okay, so here's an example of the New Hope Crown ink coming out of this pen. You can see here with some shading here, it's a lot lighter there and then darker in some parts, and then it was much darker up here because the ink had oxidized and became a little darker. The ink at the tip of the nib was just drier than the rest of the ink in the pen, and so it was a lot darker to begin with, but it definitely did keep up with my writing. I will give this ink a probably, like, it's a beautiful color, but I'm gonna give it a 7 for the ink. It has lovely shading, but it didn't feel so well coming out of this nib. So, however, the flow, I'm gonna give the flow like an 8. And then the comfort of this pen, while it is comfortable, the grip section here is very, very awkward. Like, I know it's supposed to, flares up like this so that your hand doesn't slip to the nib, and it does its job, I suppose, but it feels a little awkward. So I'm gonna give this comfort because writing with it wasn't like the most comfortable. I'm gonna give this one a 7 for comfort. And so because it's a magnetic closure, it doesn't quite keep the ink and the nib dry, or wet, not dry. It doesn't keep the nib from drying out as best as it can. And I do feel like it's because of the magnetic closure. It does have an inner cap, but for some reason the ink definitely does oxidize a little bit and dries out. Okay, the next one is my Sailor Pro Gear Slim Spring Rain with an ink that I mixed together, which is Pilot Iroshizuku Sui Gyoku and Kobe Nunobiki Emerald. Nunobiki Emerald is a little bit more blue, Sui Gyoku is more green, and so I kind of just mixed them together, and Iroshizuku Sui Gyoku appeared to be wetter than the Kobe ink. And so I needed that at the time because my Sailor Pro Gear was writing really dry, because the tines were too close. together and they were too tight. I loved writing with this ink color. Like, it's just the perfect kind of teal for me. So for the ink, I definitely liked this ink that I mixed up. This ink combo together, I'm gonna give it a 9. And then the flow, I do have a different ink in here now because I had to clean it up to bring to the San Francisco Pen Show. But at the time, let's see that. So I give the ink a 9 because it's a lovely shade of teal. The flow, I'm going to grade based on how my pen was at the time. So the flow was definitely very, very dry, even though this ink was a very wet ink. So the flow together with the Sailor Pro Gear at the time, I'm going to give it a 7 for the flow. And the comfort of this pen, as with all my Sailor Pro Gear Slims, they're very slim. Like, the grip section is just so slim, and it's a pocket pen as well. Like, if you compare it to this pen, they're about the same. Yeah, it's not too much of a pocket pen once you have the Sailor Pro Gear Slim posted, but in terms of comfort, it's about the same as my Platinum Kanazawa Makie, so I'm gonna give that a 7.5. It's very hard to write with Sailor Pro Gear Slims in longer sessions because it's a much tinier pen. Here's an example of how the Sailor Pro Gear Slim wrote with that ink. I definitely like writing with Sailor Pro Gear Slims, but I felt like at the time the nib and ink was very dry and it wasn't quite a pleasant experience, but the ink definitely kept up with, or the feed kept up with my writing, and so it wasn't a terrible flow. So definitely put that as 7. Okay, then the next pen is my Visconti Kaleido Unicorn Galaxy, and I had Ferris Wheel Press Tokyo Bay Blue. I just re-inked this pen with the Tokyo Bay Blue, and as you can see, the beautiful teal inky fingers. I'm not quite sure, for some reason, like it's not picking up a lot of ink, and that might be because of the stupid Ferris Wheel Press bottles. I can barely put this, like the nib definitely touches the ink, but for some reason I feel like it needs to be much deeper in order for the vacuum fill to actually like fill this reservoir up with ink. So I might need to invest in like an ink miser for the Visconti power fillers. This ink is absolutely divine. Ferris Wheel Press bottles, complete opposite. Ferris Wheel Press makes some gems, but the rest of, like outside of their inks that are the most beautiful inks, not many of them are amazing. Like, you get a few here and there that just tickles your fancy and they're just beautiful. This teal is one of them for me. It is a drier ink, but out of this broad nib, out of this beautiful Visconti feed, the flow of this ink pen is a 10. I have no issues with it. It didn't really dry up at all. It kept up with the flow. The comfort of this pen is surprisingly very comfortable, so I'm gonna give it a 9.5 as well. It's really nice. And then the ink, yeah, I'm giving it a 10. This is one of the most beautiful blue teals. It's definitely teal. It's very green, but you can see it leans a little bit more blue, and then it's got blue shimmer as well, and it's just gorgeous. There are parts of writing where I don't see much of the shimmer and I can see more of the green teal coming out, but I loved writing with it so much. You can see here how beautiful it is. Like, it's super broad. It's a broad nib, and so writing with it, I like writing small so you can barely tell what I'm writing, but the shimmer it's still here actually. Yeah, not sure this artificial lighting isn't really showing. Oh, okay, there we go. Beautiful, beautiful shimmer. You can see here on the H that's like the green teal underneath, and a lot of the teal blue shimmers are just sparkling. The shimmer is definitely more blue, You can see at the T right there, that's the shimmer. And then the teal undertone, lovely ink. And if there's not a lot of shimmers, it's just a beautiful teal that leans more blue. Then I have here, those stupid Ferris wheel bottle lids are just way too small. There we go. Yeah, lovely, lovely ink color. Just the worst bottle to put it in. The next pen is my Leonardo Memento Zero Grande Mother of Pearl. One of my top 3 favorite pens. This one comes with a stub nib. And I had in here Sailor Manyo Neko Yanagi. I think this was a perfect pairing for this pen because Neko Yanagi is super dry. It's a very dry chroma shading ink. Here is a sample of that ink. It's definitely got some blue undertones when it is shading, and then you have some lighter shades and then some darker purple shades in here. It's just a lovely, lovely ink, and you just got to put it in the right pen that is wet enough to be able to be legible, because as you can see here in my K, that very light lavender there in this stroke is how light this ink is going to be in most pens. So a wet nib will create these beautiful darker purples and see the chroma shading much better. So I definitely do not recommend this ink in a very, very fine nib like Sailor Medium Fines, but with a wet Leonardo gold nib and ebonite feed, this is perfect. It's dry, it's so dry that it will mesh together well with a wet flowing pen and feed. So for this, I do have a new ink in here, but I'll just use this. The ink is, I love the chroma shading properties, but I know it's a dry ink and it is legible in the right pen. So because of all that, I'm giving the ink an 8.5. The flow coming out of this pen, I'm gonna give it a 9.5. Because at times it does feel like it's starving, like you saw in that little, the much lighter lavender part, but it, for the most part, the flow was good. It kept up with my writing. And then the comfort of this pen is I'm gonna give this a 10. It just feels so comfortable in my hand. So this Memento Zero Grande feels so comfortable in my hand. And it's not just because I love the material of this resin. That definitely isn't the main factor. It just does feel very comfortable in my hands. The weight is just perfect, and the girth is just lovely, and the step down here is so minimal, and I don't feel the threads. They're not sharp, so super comfortable pen. And then the next pen here is my Leonardo Memento Zero Arabian Nights. Lovely, lovely pen. And this, I have Private Reserve Arabian Rose in here. I didn't really like this color so much. You know, as I started writing with it some more, I think I prefer it to be a little lighter. This was a little darker and a little more like mauve almost, or mauve. And for me, I wanted more of a dusty pink, dusty rose, but this was definitely more on the purple. There's a lot more purple in it than rosy pink or dusty pink. The ink actually looks really pretty here. It's almost like Sailor Shikiori Yozakura, but I do think this one's a little bit more purple than Yozakura. It's such a lovely, I just feel like this fine nib, this fine Leonardo nib is just so beautiful, and it writes amazingly. This ink was not a bad pairing with it. I definitely didn't have any issues with ink flow, and it definitely was a little darker up here, then it got lighter. So the flow definitely feels like it slowed down a little bit as I wrote more. But also up here it's a little darker too, so that, you know, it just means that the Leonardo caps aren't completely airtight, which is fine. Like that's not a big problem. So For this pen, I give the ink a 9. Well, I'm gonna give it an 8. Like, it wasn't my favorite, but it is nice, and it's definitely legible. The flow, I'm gonna give the flow a 9, because it's nice towards the beginning, and then it just slows down a little bit as I write more and more, but otherwise not a bit, no major issue. And then the comfort of this pen, I love my Leonardo Memento Zeros. They are lovely. They're the perfect like weight, not too light, not too heavy. So I'm gonna give the comfort a 9.5. And then the last pen here is my Lamy All-Star Cosmic. And I had in here a cursive Lamy nib. I did clean this one out because I finished it up and there's shimmer in it, so I waited a little too long, and so I had to really deep clean this. But Colorverse Alpha Gemini is such a beautiful, beautiful ink. It is like a dusty blue. And so let me see. So it's a dusty blue, and you can see here it is very legible and it shades really well. Like you can see here, like in my letters here, it's light right there and then darker here. So it's a lovely shader. And if you write a little slower, I write really fast, but if you write slower, you'll definitely see good shading. And you can see here, it definitely was a lot lighter and not much shimmer. So the ink is a bit on the dry side, but not too dry. And then here it is as well again. So even like Lamy nibs, the inks will tend to oxidize and dry up a little bit and then cause this much darker ink to show. And then here's the more of the true color, where you can see this lovely shading. But it's definitely very light, but it's legible. So this is what you would call like a dusty blue or dusky blue, or like a powder blue maybe. But I loved this ink so much. It was so nice. I definitely don't see the pink shimmer as much, so that part is a little sad, because the ink swatch shows pink and it's supposed to have pink shimmers. That's the beauty and the magic of this ink. But the color itself without the shimmer is lovely. I do like it. So I will give this color, because the pink shimmers don't really show up, I'm gonna give this ink a 9. And the flow, I will give the flow an 8.5. And the comfort of the Lamy, all Lamys are, you know, for me, not the most comfortable, but they're also not like uncomfortable either. So I'm gonna give it 8.5. And probably an 8. Yeah, let's do 8. Let's see, I write with this unposted. Yeah, I really just I like writing with them. It just doesn't feel comfortable sometimes. Like, for some reason, I wish that I don't know. I think it would be very hard for Lamy to create a pen that, I mean, their tripod grip here, for it to be perfect for everybody. I mean, like, I'm using with my tripod grip, but it just doesn't feel comfortable to me. So, you know, I'm gonna bump it down now that I think about it. Yeah, it's too bad, because like I do like Lamy pens. So I'm gonna give it a 7 for comfort. All right, so top 3 pens from this month is the Visconti Kaleido Unicorn Galaxy. This is just such a beautiful pen, beautiful nib, beautiful ink color to match with it. And then the second one, let's see, my Leonardo Memento Zero Grande, Mother of Pearl. Number 3, I'll have to go to, actually, yeah, these are the top 3. So the Visconti no, this is not the Homose, the Visconti Kaleido Unicorn Galaxy, and then the Bohemian Twilight Supernova, and then the Memento Zero Grande mother of pearl. And so you can see these are all very girthy big pens. So they are just more comfortable for me. I know that some people prefer longer pens that are light, and some people prefer very light pens that are shorter. These pens are, I would say, unposted, like, is an average length, and they are a little bit on the heavier side. They're like between 20 to 23 grams. So that is typically a little bit higher than most pens, which are between 12 and 18 grams. So this is my perfect 3 for May 2023. I hope you guys enjoyed grading my inks with me and just looking through a little bit of my journal entries and how they looked. If you found this fun and helpful, please leave a like and comment down below. Let me know how your currently inked pens are going. Yeah, so I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much, and I appreciate every one of you guys for watching. Bye.